Steve, are you okay to start now?
Yeah, I've got everybody I need.
Right.
So yeah, entirely up to the mayor.
Okay, Jill, can you start to stream, please?
Hi, Sharon.
Hello there, Brian. Steve, just to note, I've got the presentation loaded, so just say when, if you want me to share share my screen.
Splendid. Yep, will do.
For 1 second, Shirley, before streaming, I better put my headphones on.
We're actually streaming, Mr. Mayor.
Oh, right, okay.
Okay. To you.
Good afternoon. For those colleagues from police who don't know me, I'm Chris McHugh and I'm the mayor. We're joined by a number of members of Darlington Borough Council, and we are live streaming this. Steve, before we start, we've got until 4:50 and then members need to ready themselves for full council. So Steve, if you could introduce your colleagues and other chiefs on the call as well.
Yes, many thanks, and good to see so many of you on the call again this afternoon. So yes, I've got Sharon Cadell, who is my temporary chief executive, who's going to operate the technology for us. I've got Gary Ridley, assistant chief officer, and my chief finance officer at headquarters. Gary, is the chief with you or joining us from elsewhere?
Steve, I'm assuming she's from in her own office. I'll just nip next door and ask. I am aware she's being on a call from 3. I don't know if it's drawn over. I'm more than happy though to do her part of the presentation if that would assist.
Yeah, if we could just check. I know I was on the call that I think she was in as well, which I think ended, at least if it was the one with the minister. But yeah, if you wouldn't mind just quickly checking, and I'll do my contextual bit at the start, if that's okay.
Okay. Thank you, Steve.
Great. So yes, good evening, everybody. Afternoon. I say evening because of course it gets dark so soon. So what I wanted to primarily focus on this afternoon, but of course you will have an opportunity to ask any questions during this session, as we've got used to, is in relation to the proposed review of the Force estate, but primarily and perhaps more urgently, the proposals for a new centralised custody facility. And I see the chief has just walked in. So afternoon, Joe. So we've been conducting a number of engagement events. Well, to be brutally frank, since the beginning of August, really, which has involved face-to-face meetings with MPs, leaders of the councils, individual councillors, and other stakeholders, and we've been busy engaging and dealing with some of the issues and explaining the rationale. I'd just like to give you a bit of context around the centralised custody facility, some of which some of you might have heard before. By the way, you should have all received a letter from me this afternoon containing a list of FAQs as well in relation to the custody project. If you haven't got that, it should be coming to an inbox near you very, very shortly. It's certainly been sent out, which hopefully will answer a lot of your concerns, perhaps. But regards to that, we wanted to take you through the rationale for the custody establishment in terms of the way the Chief Constable wants to operate custody going forwards, but also touch very briefly on the review of the whole of the Force estate, which I asked the Force to do during my scrutiny of the proposed centralised custody project. As you might imagine, a project of this nature doesn't get dreamt up overnight by any stretch of the imagination. The Force has been doing quite a lot of work on it. And one of the reasons for that and why the Force has been spending some months dealing with it is essentially on the back of the HMIC FRS, as we call them now, inspection report into custody that landed last year in the force. And what essentially that demonstrated was that our force estate needed to be updated quite significantly in order to meet the current standards. It's a highly regulated environment, and all of our custody estate fell short. Now, when considering the proposed way of dealing with that in the force from the Chief Constable, there's a couple of things that occurred to me. First and foremost, custody as a function of policing lies, and the responsibility of it lies very firmly with the Chief Constable, because it's an operational matter. And as you'll be aware, this difference in terms of responsibility between the Police and Crime Commissioner and the Chief Constable is very important. I consider the custody function, as does the Chief, as an operational matter for her to decide on. She has every ability to want to run custody in the way in which she believes is best for the force. But of course, I need to keep an eye on the totality of policing across Durham and Darlington, and particularly in my acting capacity, my guiding light has always been the primary reason for a Police and Crime Commissioner, which is the provision of an effective and efficient force. It doesn't come by accident that Durham Police, as you'll be aware, for the last 4 years has been marked as outstanding by HMICFRS. It's because of a lot of hard work and innovation, and we want to continue that, and custody does form part of that. So in considering the plans, I asked the force during our executive boards that we hold monthly to make sure that the proposals that they were presenting around custody was considered in the round of the whole of the force estate. 32 years of policing experience, I have come across cases where, as you might imagine, plans for new custody builds or indeed police stations take many years of gestation and hard work before they come to fruition. And I've seen on a number of occasions where you have a brand spanking new police facility, which is all very good, and then you have porta cabins in the car park because the demands on that piece of estate has changed in the time that it's taken to build it. So I thought that it was very important that whilst custody and the custody function is a separate entity to a degree, I wanted to make sure that the force was able to consider it in the round around the rest of the force estate. And as you'll hear in the briefing, we have a significant variance in the standard of our estate, and it's something that that we need to continue to look at. So we have the review into the force estate that is going to take place. It's a much slower time piece of work that's going to go into next year quite considerably and beyond, and indeed will be primarily the responsibility of the next PCC. However, with custody we have a different issue, and that's one in relation to urgency. The Chief will explain that there is an element of operational risk in terms of the way that custody is currently functioning, and indeed in terms of my responsibilities, PCC being responsible for overall spend. I'm very conscious that, particularly against a very challenging fiscal backdrop, particularly with the results of the pandemic, that we have to make sure that any spend, and the proposals here is a very significant spend, is the right course of action, and the cost to the taxpayer locally is kept to a minimum. As a result of that, I felt very strongly that whilst considering whether or not I needed to make the decision or whether or not it needs to be delayed, I didn't feel that I would be doing my duty as the acting commissioner to just leave everything, and in particular this decision around custody, to the incoming PCC. Bearing in mind that I needed to make a decision at the end of July in relation to the next stage, which is what we're at now, which is around land acquisition and the planning process. So I felt as though I needed to make that decision. And then we started on a significant course of engagement, of which this is part. Just in relation to engagement versus consultation, I just want to make this point. Certainly when it comes to looking at the review of force estate, which may or may not involve the potential closure of premises or opening of new premises or relocation. Clearly, anything that impacts directly on public access to policing services and visibility is something that quite rightly and properly should have regard to full public consultation. In relation to custody, and I want to make this point quite strongly, with the mitigations that the Chief has put in place, in terms of the impact on the average member of the public, the new custody facility will be very minimal. Having said that, it's incumbent on us to explain why that is the case to both the public and to stakeholders, and that's why this engagement is so important. The other thing to bear in mind, of course, is that during the planning application process, there will be statutory consultation that takes place as a consequence of that, and we need to tread quite a careful and fine line in terms of the engagement that we do, particularly with Durham County councillors, because they will be the ultimate decision makers around the planning application. So there's a little bit of context in terms of where we are, in terms of my view, in terms of need to progress this project. Sorry, the one thing that I failed to mention there, in relation to the urgency around making the decision, was around the concerns that I would have in losing the potential site. These sites don't come along very often. And in fact, this isn't a case of throwing a dart at a map and saying that's where we're going to build it. An awful lot of work has gone into finding the right sort of location and the right environment where a successful planning application could be made. It's a commercial issue as well, and it may well be that any kind of delay could leave us with the loss of the site, which leaves us with a very great problem, because there isn't really any alternative at the moment that we can see. The other thing, of course, is that a delay would increase the cost of the overall project, just simply through inflation and other issues in terms of spend to get us this far. We would end up having to spend more than we already are planning to do so. So for those reasons and the other reasons that I've explained in terms of urgency, I felt the need to make the decision, albeit it's one in a series of decisions that will continue to need to be made to allow the successful conclusion of the project as we go along. And so some of those decisions will be made by the next incumbent of this position as well. So without further ado, what I propose is that we go now to the PowerPoint briefing that the Chief and Gary will take us through step by step, and then there'll be an opportunity for questions at the conclusion of that. And once we've dealt with the custody side of things, if members have other questions around general policing matters, then by all means we can take those as well. So without further ado, Joe, if you're ready to rock and roll, Sharon will deal with the slides and we'll start the briefing. Thanks.
Thanks, Steve. Sharon, would you go on to the next slide? Thank you. Afternoon, everybody. I'll talk through the operational issues related to the plan in relation to custody. Probably as a starting point, I just want to focus your attention in terms of what the purpose of those custody facility is. So it's one of the key areas where we secure evidence. So we're investigating a crime, we arrest somebody, we question them, we seize their property, some of which is of a digital nature. We obviously look at those digital devices. We sometimes seize clothing for evidence, and we sometimes swab body parts and other issues, which I won't go into a great deal of detail. But the purpose of that custody facility is in order for us to secure and preserve evidence, which obviously helps us to provide the best case we can to the Crown Prosecution Service and enables them to ensure that we provide good criminal justice outcomes for our victims. So it is a key element of our work in terms of our effectiveness and our ability to keep communities safe and to tackle criminality. So that's the starting point. Steve touched on the issues in relation to currently the custody facilities are scattered across 4 areas. This area of business, because we're obviously taking somebody's liberty, is subject to a high level of regulation and legislation, and that's all encompassed within the Home Office guidance, and goes everything from the fire regulations to the thickness of the doors to lines of sight, and I could go on and on and on, but there is a lot of regulation and guidance in this area. And last year, custody was inspected by HMI and identified, and this was no surprise, that the current facilities were inadequate. There were safety issues, and we required a clear plan in order to modernise them. We have looked previously as to whether any of the current custody facilities could be adapted, and they can't. We can talk about that in a bit more detail if anybody wants to. But we have invested and had to invest money in our existing estate in order to mitigate some of the risks that we currently carry. But not all of those risks can be mitigated by spending money, because the fabric and the design of the buildings are not compliant. So there's issues around safety of detainees, and some of the mitigation to that means that we have police resources dedicated, additional police resources dedicated. So let me give you an example of that. If the custody sergeant decides that an individual is very vulnerable and at risk of harm, and that can be said for quite a few of the people that we arrest, then that person may be subject to what we call a constant watch. In a modern facility, all of the cells would be covered by CCTV, and one employee would be able to look across a number of cells at a time, obviously using a bank of CCTV cameras in order to carry out that function. Where we're not able to get CCTV into all of the cells, which is the current arrangement, we're having to have a member of staff observing that person the whole time, which obviously is resource intensive. So just gives you one of the sort of limitations and safety issues that we currently have. Issues around privacy, again, lots of guidance. When somebody comes into custody, any dialogue between them and any of the staff shouldn't be able to be overheard by any other person within that facility. That's not the case now. We should be able to, the facility should have separate cells and wings for juveniles, women, men. Again, we don't have that. They should all have toilets and washing facilities and access to drinking water. They don't have that, and they are poor in terms of issues around efficiency, and also no natural light. And as I've put there, no clear lines of sight. Again, part of a modern design would be that the staff can have clear lines of sight down each of the wings where the cells are from the, if you like, what they call the custody desk. There's currently a lot of inefficient processes as a result of that, and just to sort of pick on a couple, it's a sort of one in, one out system currently. So if we're bringing in individuals into custody and the custody sergeant is already engaged dealing with somebody who maybe needs charging or being released from custody while we carry on further investigation, then those officers waiting with the arrested person are having to wait for the custody sergeant to become free and for the working area in that custody suite to free up in terms of space. And that's become even obviously more relevant within the pandemic. And I've touched on the difficulty of making what we currently have compliant. Like I say, we have spent some money in order to mitigate some of the risks, but they can't be eliminated and be compliant with the new or current regulations. Move on to the next slide, please, Sharon. Thank you. So the plan is to move to a centralised, what we call Bridewell. Estimated cost, you can see there, £21 million. and all of the issues of safety and compliance and regulation are then mitigated in terms of by the way of the design, in terms of the efficiency. And we'll be looking to bring some additional pooling of investigative resources. So we currently have prisoner handling teams. So those officers who deal and investigate and interview individuals, they're currently at each of the 4 locations, as are some of the investigators. We'll look to pool some of them. We'd look to therefore have some economies of scale, both in terms of the custody staff and also be able to make better use of our investigators. Our current arrangements are that if somebody requires medical support examination, we call in our force medical officers. They are in the main GPs. So in reality, what happens is that the investigation and the interviewing of that individual has to wait until they're seen by the force medical officer. So that builds in a delay. With a centralised suite, we'll be able to afford dedicated nursing staff, again, which will improve the speed and the efficiency by which we can process people through the investigative process. We'll put their court digitisation. Looking forward, we will look with our criminal justice partners to use custody facilities in order to do what we call virtual remand hearings. So the individual who's subject to that remand application will be seen from the court, but obviously via a digital network. I would anticipate moving forward that we will receive some additional money for that, and we should make the new custody provision build it in such a way that we're able to access and be able to provide those facilities. I know because you're Darlington based, the issue around travelling time, officers travelling with detained people. But if I could just again give you a bit more detail of that. Currently, officers wait outside at Darlington custody for the custody sergeant to become free. A modern facility has what we call the holding areas. So as soon as the officers arrive with a detained person, they're taken straight into custody, searched, and then put in a holding area, which is a cell, but it's got full visibility for the custody sergeants and the detention officers. And the person waits there, and the arresting and transporting officer is then able to return and return to patrol. And in addition to that, I want to make the point that less and less we are working, if you like, from the stations and tied to the stations. All of the officers, all the response officers have digital handheld devices, which enables them to access all of our operational information and intelligence systems. It allows them to read the details of an incident they're attending, to look at the history. It allows them to take statements remotely, and it allows them to take crime reports remotely. It allows them to speak to their supervisor or the custody sergeant remotely. So the need to see that the estate is the key place where you need to return in order to either do that work or have that dialogue with your supervisor is being eliminated now through the use of digital technology. And then finally on this slide, I've talked about no natural light. I've talked about the current arrangements are very cramped if you look at them against the modern design. And because of the issues around toilets and wash basins, etc. in the cells, what we have there is a lot of movement of detained people in and out of those cells, and inevitably, because of often the agitated state of those individuals, it does result on occasions in assaults on officers and staff working within the custody facility. By having those facilities within the cells, we eliminate that movement of people around, and we make both the environment and the risks, eliminate the risks that the staff and officers face currently. this internally, obviously, there's quite a lot of dialogue going on, and the Unison and the Federation are in full support of the proposal. They see the benefits from both an operational point of view, but also from a staff and officer welfare and well-being angle. Next slide, please, Sharon. This slide gives you some comparisons looking at a selection of forces there, and shows you the current cell capacity and how many suites that cell capacity is shared across. And as you can see, if you can imagine how big South Wales is, and the fact they have a capacity of 174 cells, we're a huge outlier at the moment with 4 suites, but only 53 cells. What that says to me, and just take South Wales as an example, is that they have rationalised their custody estate over the years in order to benefit and ensure that they're compliant, and currently highlights that we are an outlier in the current arrangements that we have. You know, some of this is based on geography, some of it's based on finance, and some of the issues that I've detailed in the previous two slides. I'll hand you over to Gary for the next part, specifically around the finance and the broader estate.
Thank you, Joe. Can you move on the slides, please, Sharon? Thank you. Afternoon, everybody. Just to touch upon the broader estate, as the Chief said, we have 4 main custody sites. We do have a small fallback site. It is small. It's only have about 5 or 6 cells in it, Spennymoor. This is part of the 12 main station block, and as you know, we do have a main police station in each large settlement area that we have across the force. In addition to our 12 main stations, we have 15 neighbourhood bases. These are also known as section officers. And again, these with the main stations form the bedrock of service provision from a neighbourhood policing model. What's slightly less well known is we have 10 more specialised assets. I've mentioned 4 there on the slides. These are not operational police stations. However, they do form a really important part of the fabric of the estate in terms of how we deliver our business. And quite often when we think about the estate, we just tend to think around police stations and not much else. But these specialist assets do perform an important function. Can you move on, please, Sharon? In terms of progress and austerity, if I could start with the bottom point there first. In reality, very similar to running a local authority, we cannot run a complex service-based service without ICT, which tends to get more complex and more expensive, and therefore more costly as time goes by. Neither can we run our businesses without vehicles. And what that means in practice is any capital resources that we have at our disposal or given to us by the government, ICT and fleet tend to be the first call on that spend, and unfortunately estates tends to come after that. What I'd also point out is that we've taken on board a lot of learning from COVID, as I'm sure everybody has. And one of the things that we're trying to maintain business as usual status with is this idea of making as many people who work in the force as possible working from home. That's went quite well, but also to make sure that we use technology to make our officers and staff not only as omnicompetent as possible, also as mobile as possible, which means they can actually be briefed by their inspectors and sergeants whilst within vehicles. They can deploy to any asset that I've so far mentioned, and they do operate in a very, very agile manner. But looking at the top, what are we doing? We haven't just sat there during austerity and done nothing with the estate. I think most of you understand that we've got the new headquarters up in Durham. We have an excellent warehouse facility, which was the old Royal Mail sorting office within Peterlee. That does have a lot of our specialist assets deployed from there. We also have our main forensic capability within there as well. We have a modern, excellent, in my opinion, training facility in Meadowfield, which is just west of Durham city centre, which not only do we use, but a number of other forces come to use for training purposes as well. The SARC is our sexual assault referral centre. We've just spent money on buying the court building at Chelsea Street to turn it into our SARC. That building is actually physically attached to the police station, and that is not uncommon. We see that not just at Chelsea Street, but also at Darlington Police Station, and also, let me think, at Bishop Auckland as well. Also at Chelsea Street, it houses Special Branch and our Digital Investigation Unit. The Chief touched upon the fact that we do retrieve a lot of electronic devices these days in terms of how we deliver our services. These take an awful lot of effort to investigate as part of the overall investigation process. And this is clearly a growth area for us. We have spent in excess of, I would estimate, probably £1 million in the last decade on trying to improve custody to make it as compliant as possible, but also to carry out repairs as and when needed. We tend to upgrade at least one of our neighbourhood bases every year to make it modern and fit for purpose. And finally, we do go through a regular programme of heating upgrades. And to put it in perspective, to put a central heating system into a medium-sized police station, you're probably looking at about £200,000 a year, and that will probably extend the life of that building by probably about a decade or so. So these are things that we do, quite often goes unseen, but it all contributes to the PCVC office of maintaining the fabric of the estate. If you can move on, please, Sharon. Issues to address. Like any other public body, I think it's fair to say we have some very good assets. We have some ones who are average, and we have some ones which are quite poor. Running costs vary quite considerably, as can be seen. We spend just under about £90 per square metre of every space that the acting PCVC owns. We've never been high spenders on our estate. And when we do benchmarking across the 43 other police forces in England and Wales, we're in the third lowest quartile, i.e. below average. What we have done instead, the money that we have had, we've tended to spend on police officers and technology and fleet. We do feel as though that's the best way to maximise service delivery. The assets we hold primarily are freehold, i.e. we can do with them as we please. There's a smaller number of leasehold assets, which means that we physically don't hold the land upon which the assets sit. And if we do want to change or improve the assets, we do have to talk to the leaseholder, which can be quite a time-consuming and expensive exercise to go through. And my final point, I would say, is that generally speaking, the assets which are held tend to be of relatively low value, probably made worse by the pandemic. And the reason why they tend to have low value is because when you have a police station, that there is not a lot of alternative uses for a police station per se. What that means is anybody looking to acquire a police station would probably think to themselves that to redevelop anything, they need to demolish it, and would therefore take into account cost of demolition in relation to any asking price that we may request. Hence the reason why asset values tend to be fairly low. If you move on, please, Sharon. Collaboration with partners, just briefly. We collaborate with Fire and Rescue in Barnard Castle Quad Station and Newton Aycliffe. This involved us moving out of the existing 2 stations in those locations and moving literally less than a few hundred yards away into new modern assets, and I feel as though that works quite well. We also share some assets with Darlington Council as well, and we also have some officers, some staff from the council actually working inside Darlington Police Station in our multi-agency safeguarding hub. Next slide, please, Sharon. So custody next steps, engagement. This is part of it today. We are looking to submit the planning application to the County Council very imminently. That will include a statutory process, a statutory consultation process, which the council will run. If that goes according to plan and we get a positive result, there will be a procurement process that will probably take us about 3 months to go through to procure a builder. There is about an 18-month build period for this particular project, if all things go to plan. And if that's correct, what I've just said, the handover period, sorry, the handover point would be in the spring of 2023. So, you know, nothing's going to happen overnight. Once that happens and we move into the new custody block, there will be some other ancillary moves around things like crime scene investigators will be working outside of the new site, and we will use it to also centralise some of our property storage requirements as a force as well. Next slide, please, Sharon. And just finally, a bit more broadly, we do have a proposed strategy for estates. What we're trying to do within this, where we continually look at what our demand looks like, not just now, but potentially into the future. We consider that against how much money we have, and we also consider that against the ever-changing piece, which is police technology, and we try to put all that together to make sure that we try to be as efficient and effective as possible. Acting PCVC has taken the initial decision to invest in the new custody facility, which will require purchase of land just after the hopefully the positive approval of the planning application. There will be key engagement with stakeholders, of which we mean briefings with elected officials, ongoing discussions with officers, briefings with parish councils, area action partnerships, town councils, local businesses, the health service who we use, and not to mention all of our key suppliers. So we do have quite a wide-ranging list of individuals to talk to. Sharon, I think that's the final slide. Just conscious of time, I'll stop there. More than happy to.
Thank you, Gary. Also, Joe and Steve. I'm going to bring colleagues in, but before I do, just on your final slide, don't forget the public, which I'm sure you won't, because it's one thing to brief us as members, but we're all here to serve the public, which sounds a bit trite, but I'm sure we all get that point. Okay, I'll bring Brian in. Brian Jones, sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. 2 questions, please, Steve. It's now 6 weeks since at the meeting of the Police and Crime Panel I requested sight of the estates report. It wasn't forthcoming. I requested it again at the Police and Crime Panel meeting last week, and it's still not forthcoming. Can you give me some kind of guarantee that I will be able to see this, or members of the Police and Crime Panel will be able to see it, please? And second question, can you tell me whether there are any plans for reusing the existing cell blocks when they become redundant? I can imagine it being quite difficult to put those back into some kind of useful purpose. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Brian. Steve, to respond. Yeah,
thank you, Brian. To be brutally frank, I'm not sure why you haven't got the strategy yet, because you should have it by now. I'm just sort of looking at Sharon and Gary. I know there was a little bit of redacting that needed to happen, but as far as I'm aware, you should have it. So, Gary, can you just update us? Brian asked the question. I think you were busy talking there in relation to the estate strategy that we promised him in the panel.
If that's right, can I come in, please, Steve? It is actually with me, and it's an abridged version that we committed to providing at the Police and Crime Panel, as opposed to redacted. So that's as I explained last week, Councillor Jones, and I'm very sorry it hasn't arrived by now. But it's a bigger piece of work than certainly I'd anticipated in abridging that. But that has been progressed, and I'm confident it will be finished by tomorrow, and we will be in a position to send that out by tomorrow.
Thank you, Sharon.
And in relation to your other point around the use of the cells, I'll bring Gary in a second if I may, but of course it's really challenging, and I've worked in many police stations where you have cell blocks that are used to store lockers and things of that nature, which is really highly unsatisfactory. But of course, any kind of remedial work to the estate is going to cost money, which is why the single centralised custody facility had to also be complemented by the estate strategy so that all of that could be dealt with. And of course, don't forget, we've got an uplift of 226 officers and we've got to find somewhere to put them all, which is a good problem to have, but it is an issue. Gary, did you just want to add any more to the renovation, in inverted commas, of the disused cell blocks?
Just very briefly, there's very limited alternative use, Councillor Jones, other than storage, which is less than less than ideal. In reality, what we'd probably do would be to cease to use those parts of the particular stations.
Okay. Councillor Curry.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. In the briefing, you said that each of the new cells will have toilet and wash facilities. Will we have a fairly hefty budget for repairs that may need doing if police officers are getting beaten up by agitated people that live in the cells? Can we make sure that we have a fairly decent repair system, because I have a feeling taps will get pulled off and toilet seats and stuff will be damaged. So do we have enough of facility for that?
Interesting question from Councillor Curry. Steve, to respond.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that makes building custody centres so expensive is because all of this kind of all of these issues are tried to be designed out. So the toilets and the wash facilities that you get in a new custody facility are different to what you and I probably used to. But Gary, did you want to provide a little bit more detail on that?
So yes, the design of the toilets and wash basins make what you've just said, Councillor, very, very difficult. So for instance, the toilets actually don't have seats on, everything's stainless steel. But the broader point is, yes, we do have a repairs budget for the whole of the estate. What will happen in practice, because it will be brand new, there will be a period which is still under repair guarantee as well. So yes, the answer is yes.
I'm sure we'll see the design if it progresses. Councillor Cruddas.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just the thought that currently when we have someone in custody and then determine that we need to release them, quite often we'll be putting them down on their own streets, if you like. Now, if you're taking someone from a different part of the county to a custody suite, you might be freeing them up late in the night or something like that. How is there a provision to take people back to where we got them if we had that? I mean, is it a chauffeur-driven police car, or what's the thoughts around that?
Thank you, Councillor Cruddas. Steve, colleagues to reply?
Yeah, I'll ask Joe to come in a second, but sure. Of course, you're going to have that problem wherever your custody centre is in terms of release. But yeah, Joe, this is something that we've had before, not surprisingly. Joe, did you want to come in there?
Yeah, so a couple of points on that, and this is maybe relevant and broader than just answering your question. People aren't always taken to the nearest custody facility even now. So we make a determination at any point that there's an arrest of what's the most suitable location to go to. In an ideal world, it's the closest one. But because of the limitations, it may be that there isn't a juvenile cell if it's a juvenile, so we have to go somewhere else. So there is a degree of sort of crisscrossing across the estate now, and therefore those people, not necessarily juveniles, are released from the custody facility where they've been detained. We are releasing obviously people into communities, into neighbourhoods now. On occasions where on release, we carry out a pre-release risk assessment. I mean, this is one of the areas where this area of policing business has expanded and extended over the years. We are obliged to carry out a risk assessment at the point of detention, and some of that will determine whether somebody needs to see a medical practitioner or somebody from the mental health team. We also have to detail a pre-release risk assessment. And if there is a vulnerability, on occasions, we do take those individuals back home, depending on that level of vulnerability. So if they were a young person, we would take them home. But wherever you place a custody facility, you are releasing people, in that area, and that's obviously happening now across Durham and Darlington.
Okay, thank you, Jo. I've got 4 more questions. I'm very conscious of time, so if not wishing to curtail debate, if you can make your questions brief, please. Councillor Cousins, please.
Mine was very similar to Councillor Cruddas, just about the release of people who have been detained. And, if they have no money, they're taken to Spennymoor, they live in Darlington, you've taken their technology off them, how are they going to get home? Basically the same question, and I know you've answered in a roundabout way, but it is quite a serious issue.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Can I bring in Councillor Layton, please? And then I've got 2 more questions.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I was just noting when you talk about having nursing staff on site, whether this will include obviously mental health nurses, and will these be staff that are sort of seconded from hospitals or GP practices, or are they permanent staff that you'll have there all the time? Thank you very much.
I'll defer to the chief, who I know has the answer for this one, if that's okay.
So in terms of mental health provision, that's currently provided by the Mental Health Trust, and we don't have 24/7 coverage at each of the locations. So the staff that work for the trust move between the facilities. So it follows that obviously with a central facility, we'll be able to have, again, round the clock, I anticipate round the clock support through what we call L&D, liaison and diversion team. In relation to the physical, and that being a nurse, that will be a contract that we will enter into with a provider, so it won't be drawing on local GP or hospital resources.
Okay. I've got 2 more questions. Thank you, Jo, for that. I've got 2 more questions. I'm going to seek to keep us to time. I'll take those 2 questions, and at the end, Steve, I'm going to suggest if other colleagues have questions, they can email or speak to you direct, and in the interest of transparency, you'll probably play back what they may have asked. Can I bring in Councillor Dulston, please?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. No, I mean, I've had the opportunity to spend the day visiting custody centres across the Force area with Adrian Green today, and actually it has been a massive insight, particularly at Durham City, where they really are in quite a bad way. But what was interesting is actually on a Thursday afternoon at probably 2 o'clock, we were in Durham. There was 4 cars waiting to book prisoners in, and again in the concept of what you've said, Jo, about people waiting time in backyards is significant. So I think for me it's a real eye opener, and I would urge as many councillors to take up those offers of visits, because it's certainly opened my eyes. The second point I would say is just to repeat what councillors have expressed. We've also been to the site today where the proposal will be, and it is a field in the middle of nowhere, give or take. It's near the Finford roundabout. But if we are letting prisoners out there, we are potentially putting them into further vulnerability. Now, I know, having spoken to officers today, that they do make every effort to take them to more suitable locations. So I'm sort of comfortable with that element. But I suppose the final piece, what I would say to members, and particularly members of Parliament as well, is that up to now, no one's seen the plans. I'm fortunate enough to have seen the actual blueprints of what it will look like today. But up to now, other members haven't. So I'm conscious that actually those speak volumes. So it may be something that you do on a one-to-one basis, because I'm conscious that they are sensitive. But that will certainly put people's minds at rest as well.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Gulston. And finally, Councillor Lee.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Brevity is always good in a question, as Tony Richmond used to say, Councillor Lee.
I didn't get that bit, actually, Mr. Mayor, but however. Good afternoon, Steve. Steve, I'm just interested in the existing 5 custody blocks. I mean, what is the police ongoing responsibility to maintain these, and have these costs been included in the project, in the overall cost programme of the project? Sorry. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
I'll probably defer to Gary on this one, if I may, because he will know the detail about trying to keep up with ever-changing regulation. But just before I go to Gary, just on Councillor Dalston's point, and I know we're pushed for time, of course, I'm sure that, and in fact, I know that the Chief and I are both very supportive of arresting any of you at any point to be able to let you come and visit the custody suites. So please take advantage of that, and we'll try and facilitate that. But Gary, did you want to deal with that issue around the existing suites, please?
Yes, yes, Councillor Lee, in relation to your first point, notwithstanding that these assets won't be used, the acting PCVC as owner will still be under a legal obligation to maintain these in a safe manner. In relation to its direct operational use, I think what will happen in practice is that they will no longer be used, and we will therefore seek to manage those buildings in a way that reduces the cost of that, i.e. we will not be heating them, we will not be repairing them, we will not be cleaning them, and that will represent an opportunity to save money. We have not yet costed that out though.
Okay. Okay, we've gone over our. Did you answer fully, Steve, Councillor Lee's question? Do you think?
I think I did, unless.
Brilliant. I'm sure you did. I'm sure you did.
Yeah.
Okay, colleagues, this is a very important issue. Councillor Dalston has made some very useful suggestions around go and see. As Mayor, in my previous work life, I had some involvement with custody suites professionally. I put ECPs into the Middlesbrough one back in the day. And so that I get the argument about having modern facilities, be it healthcare, be it custody or prison health. So there is some merit in going to see this. Steve, are you okay if further questions or issues arise to take email or perhaps have a telephone conversation, and also Joe and your other colleagues if necessary?
Yes, of course, at any point. And the engagement, as I said, I sent letters out again today, will continue. So you'll continue to get updates from me. But in the meantime, if the FAQs and the information that you've already had still leaves you with concerns and questions, by all means, come through to me in my office, or indeed through the Chief, definitely. Yeah, and I'm sure, apologies, Councillor Cully, I never got to you, but I'm sure Steve will take your question by email or telephone and come back to us all. Okay, we need to get ready to go on to our next meeting. Can I thank you on behalf of members for a very thorough presentation, Steve, Joe and other colleagues. I'm sure the debate and discussion will continue, no doubt. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks very much. Good to see you all. Take care.